the ICJ has given its verdict on Israel, saying that Israel's presence in Palestine is unlawful. Now, this has prompted many nations around the world calling for international law to be upheld. Unsurprisingly, the US has questioned the ruling, saying, "We are concerned that the breadth of the court's opinion will complicate efforts to resolve the conflict and bring about an urgently needed, just and lasting peace with two states living side by side in peace and security," the US Department of State told the Reuters news agency. Now, the UK has said nothing, absolutely nothing. That's very strange for Keir Starmer, a man who says he supports international law, has nothing to say on the ICJ, given its opinion on how Israel is acting unlawfully. Labour has refused to make a statement. It's been 3 days. So, I mean, look, Keir Starmer, the statesman guy, the guy who loves international law, well, the ICJ has just said that what Israel's doing is illegal. They said it was an apartheid state, and our government has said nothing. Lewis, what's going on?
If I had Keir Starmer in front of me right now, and I was a proper journalist with a little microphone and a notepad, my question to him would be: You said that Israel isn't an apartheid state. You said that they had a right to self-defense. You don't think what they're doing is illegal. Are you the worst human rights lawyer that has ever existed?
It's
That
a
would
good
be my
question.
question to him,
It's a good
because
question.
this is what happened. That clip has been going viral. I think, if I remember correctly, it was the Jewish Chronicle that was interviewing him in that clip. That's kind of surfaced again,
Yes. Yeah,
and
I
it's
do
him
remember
saying, "Do
actually.
you think Israel's an apartheid state?" And you know what? If he wanted to be careful and try and get around answering that question, then yeah, maybe I could find maybe some room to possibly forgive him if he's being aggressive towards Israel as he's come into power. But he didn't. He straight up was like, "No, it's not an apartheid state." And now that's been proven wrong. And again, it's just constantly frustrating that this guy was a human rights lawyer. Even his mentor released an op-ed in the Guardian the day that I think it was leading up to the decision, basically kind of hinting towards the fact that he was a bit disappointed in Kia because this guy was super pro Israel. Obviously, are in the wrong. This is going to push people against them. This is going to push countries against them. Labour need to stand with the ICC and the ICJ. This is his mentor, and I just find it frustrating how he's been so staunch on this when you actually look at his full track record, and now he's got to answer for it.
I think though Starmer's problem has been on Gaza from the very beginning, since before he was even leader. His problem has been the stance that the Labour Party took against Jeremy Corbyn's leadership on anti-Semitism due to Corbyn and the party's stance on Israel and Palestine under the Corbyn leadership. They spent so much time calling anyone that spoke out in support of Palestine anti-Semitic, and made it such an ingrained part of the Labour Party to the point where you're more likely to be kicked out of the party if you're Jewish on that issue than anybody else. That Stammer and his team, they've tied their own hands behind their back. They can't comment on it. They can't speak publicly in any way that seems to be supportive of Palestine without having to tread very, very carefully, because if they do, they are going to meet their own definitions of what they claim was anti-Semitism. And it's put Labour in this position where they can't even make their mind up on the ICC thing, where they, one minute they're saying they're gonna withdraw and they're not gonna oppose it, and then they're saying, oh no, we will, and then we're not sure, and then, well, it depends on this and it depends. Like they can't make their mind up it, and it's because they know that the second they say that they support Palestine, or the second they say we recognize the ICJ ruling, people are going to come at them and say, but hang on a second, when Corbyn said that 5 years ago, you accused him of being an anti-Semite. And I honestly think that that's where this stems from. There's probably more to it, but I think for me, it all stems back to the way that Starmer and his mates behaved under the previous leadership on this issue. And unfortunately, it's led to this situation where we've got a Labour government, a Labour Prime Minister, who, like Lewis says, a human rights lawyer, who can't even call out human rights abuses when the international courts are calling it out.
Lewis, I mean, you made a good point, though. I mean, we were talking about that viral video where he was straight up asked, like, yeah, I mean, Israel an apartheid state? He said no. And I think you are right in terms of, I think what we've seen over the last 9 years, that you probably can't get into power if you are, I mean, in terms of forming a government, I mean, you can become an MP, an independent MP, as we've seen, but you can't become prime minister if you're aggressive on Israel. I mean, the Israel lobby is pretty powerful, right? That you are literally called anti-Semitic for just the mildest criticism or just pointing out that Israel is an apartheid state. So I do understand if Keir Starmer was trying to be mealy-mouthed about it, like, oh, I don't know if I want to say it's an apartheid state order, but there's problems there,
But that's
whatever it is.
pre-election though, right?
But that's pre-election, right? Yeah. But here's the thing, right? They're now in power. There's no opposition. The Tory party got 24% in the polls. They are way behind. Sorry, 20%, wasn't it? Anyway, they are way behind, so they don't need to be careful as much with their messaging. So you're absolutely right. I mean, Starmer is the worst human rights lawyer probably ever, right? But it's very interesting to touch on what you say, Callum, that when it comes to the ICCs, I mean, we still don't know exactly when it comes to the arrest warrant what's going to happen there, but it's very likely that the ICC will issue an arrest warrant to Benjamin Netanyahu. The Tory government's policy was to try and block it or at least delay it, which is awful. And Labour literally announced within their first week saying, if there is an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, we won't block it. I was pleasantly surprised. I thought, you know what, that is completely in accordance with international law. When Keir Starmer says he respects our international institutions, that is consistent with it. Yet within a few days, they U-turned on it. So, of course, none of us are surprised about Labour's silence on the ICJ. But you can't say that you support our international institutions if you won't echo the ICJ's ruling. The ICJ's ruling was 15 judges, I believe. It was pretty stringent in their research on it, and they're looking at the evidence. Callum, what's going on there? I mean, look, surely Keir Starmer can get away with saying, well, I support the ICJ. He could even export his opinion. He could even say, look, I'm not saying that I think that Israel is an apartheid state, or I think these things, but the ICJ says it, and I back the ICJ. Can't he just say that?
I think, and that's all he needs to say. That's all he needs to say is that we respect and recognise the ruling. That's all he needs to say. He doesn't even need to elaborate any further. I think another big problem for the government at the moment is the allyship that we have with Israel. If this was America that were committing these atrocities, the government would also be struggling to call them out. When Russia are committing war crimes in Ukraine, Keir Starmer has no issues at all, rightfully saying these are war crimes that have been committed. But when Israel are committing war crimes, oh well, I couldn't possibly say, it's not for me to judge, and we need other people. But you've got the ICJ ruling that it is an apartheid state. That it is occupied territory.
If I can push back on something, I think, okay, controversial statement, guys. Here we go. Israel gets too much flack. Do you know who needs to get more flack? The US. Because at the end of the day, the reason why Israel it's not as powerful as we make it out to be. Like, yes, you can talk about AIPAC and Labour Friends of Israel and Conservative Friends of Israel and the money that goes through these things and keeping politicians sweet. Like, yeah, all that's a thing. The true power of why Israel is allowed to do what it's allowed to do is because of the US. Yeah. And how they utilize Israel as a strategic point in the Middle East. It's the US who are trying to stop the ICC ruling by lobbying our government to stop that warrant from going through. But even going back further, the current prosecutor, who's a British prosecutor, he guess who opposed him getting into power when the UN were trying to put him in power? The US, because he has a record of, by the way, not just being, I wouldn't use the word anti-Israel, just critical of Israel, but he's also taken down like other, Islamist type of groups as well, and other Islamic extremists, while also going for other groups as well. So that's why he was the perfect candidate, because he wasn't just critical of Israel. He was basically, he's critical of everyone under the guise of human rights. Then actually the prosecutor that came before him, the Trump administration sanctioned him because he was going after Israel too. They literally put sanctions on the prosecutor of the ICC. That is how far the US are willing to go to protect their interests in the Middle East. And this is why we need to sometimes focus more on the US power of why Israel are allowed to do what they're allowed to do, rather than just
Well,
focusing
no,
on Israel
I think no.
itself.
Before you come in, I think Lewis, you're absolutely right. By the way, I mean, I wouldn't phrase it as in with Israel gets too much flack. I mean, I don't think you can ever give too much flack to a country
Fair
that's
enough, fair
committing
enough.
genocide. But you're absolutely right that largely this is the US and
Yes.
it's the US hegemony. So I mean, Rachel Atwood said in the comments, is Keir Starmer a committed Zionist as much as Biden? I don't think he is. I think he's a committed servant of power, and right now the mega power in the world is the US. And I think if the US actually took a stronger stance against Israel, I could totally see Keir Starmer being stronger on Israel because of the US. And we don't have an independent foreign policy, right? It is imported from the US. I do think, of course, Israel obviously has an influence over the Labour Party in terms of its policy. They give money to cabinet members, so there's definitely an influence there. But I think if you ask me, Keir Starmer, I mean, I don't want to say loyalty here, but if he's swayed on anything, it is mostly the US, I think. Again, to reiterate, if the US was stronger on Israel, I think the UK would back them on that as well.
Because I totally agree with both of you in terms of the influence of America, and I just wanted to sort of put out to you both, kind of, in relation to the previous conversation in terms of Donald Trump, because a lot of people argue that Trump's, when I often hear this argument that, well, when Trump was in charge, there wasn't any wars. I mean, there was, but that's by the by. But how do we feel about a potential Trump government, and will Trump being back in the White House, do you think that will change America's foreign policy on Israel and Gaza, or will it double down?
It will absolutely strengthen it. We can't forget, again, as I just mentioned, the Trump administration sanctioned the previous ICC prosecutor. They moved the U.S. embassy from, I think it was from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. They are super pro-Israel in a way that I don't think even Biden. I think Biden even gets outshadowed. I don't think it's even Trump himself. It's just like the right-wing conservative America. They're super pro-Israel.
It's the Republican Party, but
So,
I mean, I would say it is Trump himself, because Trump is someone who is willing to go against the Republican establishment in times. Doesn't always necessarily mean as for good reasons, but he has been. He can bend the RNC or the Republican Party to his will. They are weak to stand up to him. So if Trump wanted to, he could totally be like, "Oh, I'm more pro-Palestine." But he's the most powerful person in the Republican Party. He is the Republican Party. So I would say that Trump's ideological view on Israel just lines up with the GOP.
I would actually push and say that his probably hatred for Muslims probably drives him more towards supporting Israel, because again, like this idea
I think
that
a lot of Zionists have that view, and I mean,
they do.
They do. There are a lot of Zionists. Not every one of them. I don't want to smear all of them, but a lot of Zionists are incredibly Islamophobic.
But just to remind everyone, it was only, I think, about a year ago where Trump was having dinner with Nick Fuentes, a literal neo-Nazi. Not even in the hyperbolic sense where sometimes we're like, oh, that person's a bit like a Nazi. No, he is a literal neo-Nazi. He was even commenting on the fact that JD Vance's wife wasn't white just 2 days ago on his stream. And then he also had dinner on the same night with Kanye West. And this was at the height of him tweeting out about the worst Jewish conspiracy theories in the world. Like, this is who Trump was having dinner with. So I don't think he's as friendly to Israel as people might work out. I think it just ends up lining up with other parts of his ideology that he wants to strengthen. The war on terror, strong against Muslims, all this other type of stuff as well.
I'm excited to say that Turn Left has significantly grown this year. And with that, we've managed to produce far more ambitious content, interviewing high-profile people. We did a 12-hour live election show. There are multiple people behind Turn Left, but we are still working around our full-time work. But we would love it if this was our full-time. It means we could dedicate so much more and to bring even more ambitious content. So if you've been here from the beginning, or you've only recently become a viewer, if you like what we do, then you can help us out. Please like and share this video. Make sure you drop a comment. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your feedback. and we desperately need more independent media. If you want to see a socialist media alternative thrive, then you could be part of that. So if you can, you could support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month, or any one-off donation. We can use that money to upgrade our equipment, to rent out a proper studio, and to start paying ourselves. This is only the beginning. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Patreon.com, Turn Left Media. Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you, Turn Left.